Black Widow is a comic book character that everybody knows, but not many have as their favorite. Natalia Romanova has been part of prominent superhero teams and been romantically linked to some of Marvel's most iconic names over the course of her history. But for some weird reason, the Black Widow fanbase pales in comparison not only to the fanbases of other Avengers, but also to the fandoms of other female comic characters. But why? Is it because of a lack of powers, which makes her uninteresting? Is it due to a lack of solid writers and artists who've taken over the character? Or have Black Widow comics secretly been amazing this whole time? But just like the undercover spy Natasha was trained to be, their astounding quality has simply gone under the radar. Before we begin with this deep dive, I just want to say how weird the process of making this video was. This video was just supposed to be about one specific Black Widow comic, but I started reading a bunch of the other ones for some background, and I ended up writing the longest video I have made by far. Today we'll cover what modern Black Widow comics are like, and who the character of Natasha Romanoff really is. We'll discuss her place in the Marvel Universe, the potential reasons why she doesn't resonate as much with fans, and the comic that I think perfected her. So, sit comfortably and grab a snack as I try to discover why Black Widow is swept under the rug despite being one of the most iconic characters in the Marvel Universe. But we can't have an in-depth discussion about the character without talking about her comics. So, what the heck happens in Black Widow comics? Now, I haven't read all of them, so I'm not the ultimate expert on this topic, but I've read most of her mainline series over the past decade or so I can say I am familiar with what her modern books are like. I even read her series from the early 2000s, where its obvious cover artist Greg Land traced the art for the cover of the 5th issue, because Black Widow and her target, Vasily Ulyanov, are drawn in completely different art styles and look like they come from entirely different universes. But enough of that nitpick, let's move on. Black Widow, at its core, is a spy comic. It features hordes of enemies with guns, underground criminal operations awaiting to be busted, and lots of people being beaten up for information. Sometimes we see the character on the run from authority due to assassinating public figures or information about Natasha's sinful past leaking to the public. Other times, Black Widow stories are all about disrupting dangerous operations, whether it's preventing the Rapistan military from using hazardous biochemical weapons, or dismantling a live torture show that lets its highest bidder do whatever they want to a kidnapped victim. Black Widow in these stories is constantly shot at and kidnapped at least once every 2 missions, it seems. And if Natasha has a male assistant, they often get horribly injured and sent to the hospital. Now, because Black Widow comics are usually set in locations where the strongest superheroes are absent, they can have a sense of tension that keeps you turning the page. You might think that because of the lack of superheroics, Black Widow stories don't have good action, but you are so wrong on that front. Seeing Natasha just barely manage to get out of sticky situations and always being on the brink of death makes for some of the most memorable, exciting, and beautiful action sequences I've ever seen in comics. Specifically, the 12-issue series written by Mark Waid and illustrated by Samnee has the best Black Widow action possibly of all time. The first arc especially has dialogue take a back seat and action placed at the forefront, resulting in some of the most exciting action sequences I've ever seen as a comic fan. Later on in the series, there is one specific moment that I was just astounded by. Black Widow and Anya are having this legendary final battle on a detached platform that's rapidly rushing through a flood facility in Antarctica. When Natasha finally has her enemy at a chokehold, we see a panel that shows the action in silhouette, and it looks like Natasha stabbed Anya and blood is spewing out of her body. But the following panels show Anya waking up, realizing she's alive, and then we turn to the next page and see the full picture. This splash page shows the verticality of Anya's drop as the rushing waters swallow her whole, and how close Natasha was to suffering the same fall, holding on for dear life. This is Black Widow action at its peak, and it is a glorious thing to behold. And at the center of it all lies Natasha Romanoff. But who is she? So far, I've only described what happens in Black Widow stories, and when it comes to selling superhero comics, you have to have people care about the star of your book. But is there even any reason to care about Black Widow? Well, let's find out by asking the question, who is Black Widow? Natalia Romanova was an orphan who was trained and raised by a man named Ivan Bezukov. She would then join the war at a young age, and following that would be dragged into a harsh and cruel program which trained girls to become spies for the Russian government. And among all the girls under the Red Room's rigorous training, she emerged as the program's ultimate weapon. Black Widow can do everything a spy needs to do at an exceptional, unbelievable level. You want to pick a fight with her? She can take you down in an instant with her graceful and acrobatic moveset, or shock you with her electrifying Widow's bite. Want to start a bit of chatter before your showdown with her? Well, that's what Lady Bullseye does in issue 4 of Marjorie Liu and Daniel Acuna's Black Widow series, and as she tries to draw her weapon, she realizes Black Widow poisoned her in the middle of their conversation. Okay, so if Black Widow is an expert in combat, what if you try capturing her or giving her some kind of debuff to take her down? Well, she can kick crooks while tied to the ceiling, engage in combat while blind, and get out of any contraption you place her in. In issue 5 of the same series mentioned earlier, she even jokes to Emus, her captor, to make her restraints tighter, which is an absolutely wild thing to say when you're in a situation like that. In addition to combat, she is an expert actor, able to play roles ranging from widowed business owners to sexy seductresses. She's also incredibly good at sensing danger and knowing if someone's watching her. In Black Widow's 1999 series by Devin Grayson and Jeffrey Jones, a Russian spy named Elena stalks Natasha throughout her day. But when Black Widow saves her from trouble on her own mission, we find out that Natasha was well aware this whole time that she was being stalked. Whenever we meet other spies who were trained in the Red Room in Black Widow comics, Natasha is always one step ahead of them. She isn't just a standout from the Black Widow Ops program. She is the Black Widow. But people are more than their abilities. Yes, Natasha Romanoff's prowess in all things espionage is a cool part of her, but it doesn't tell the full story. After all, abilities aren't the only thing that makes a character likable and special. So let's talk about her personality. What is it like? Well, even though Black Widow has gone to the good side, she still maintains the personality of an agent. Natasha always prioritizes her mission first, rarely ever having a life of her own. She executes her objectives in a clinical and composed manner, never letting her emotions get in the way. Black Widow stories are rarely about introspection and internal drama. It's always just about completing mission after mission, defeating enemy after enemy. Natasha is a workaholic, even more so than the average superhero. She doesn't have any interests or hobbies outside of work, or if she does, I don't know about them. Like the climate of her country, Natasha is an incredibly cold character. She kills enemies with no remorse, not afraid to be brutal when she needs to be. Actually, a few comics show her reveling and delighting in the brutality she intends to inflict on her enemies. Black Widow is also extremely harsh with her words, especially to other spies from the Red Room who she believes to be beneath her. Not only is she cold towards her enemies, but also towards her friends. She often distances herself from those around her, not allowing many people to get too close or intimate. Even though she has had many lovers over the years, she's never been one to truly settle down. And this coldness doesn't just come from her harsh heritage, but is also most likely due to her past experiences of loss with her ex-husband Alexei and ex-lover Nikolai. Overall, Black Widow is a character that I think I get the appeal of, and who can mean a lot to others as well. She's a character that was raised in an incredibly dark place, being brainwashed to work for a cause she was forced to believe was right. And despite that horrifying heritage, she was able to overcome it and fight on the side of good. But even though I appreciate Black Widow's characters from reading a lot of her stories, I also kind of understand why she's not the center of attention and why she doesn't have as big of an audience as other characters in the Marvel universe. And with that, we finally try to answer the dreaded question. Is there a problem with Black Widow? This is not a segment intended to destroy Black Widow or anything. I'm just trying to understand why her books don't sell as well as other Marvel characters, and why she rarely appears on people's lists of their favorite Marvel superheroes. So let's go through each possible factor one by one. A spy amidst a superhero universe. Firstly, I think the fact that Black Widow doesn't have a colorful superhero costume or any unique powers could be why her books have low sales. People read Marvel comics mainly for superhero stories, and Black Widow comics being spy thrillers mean that they're pretty niche and won't automatically attract a ton of fans. This is what makes good Black Widow stories so cool though. They're a breath of fresh air that's different from what Marvel usually puts out. But unfortunately, some people don't know that, because when they think of Black Widow, they think of B, her reputation as a sex symbol. Black Widow's reputation for being a hyper-sexualized character could also be a factor as to why people are reluctant to read her books. I did not consider this when going into this video, but reading a bunch of Black Widow Goodreads reviews by women who mentioned their fear of reading Black Widow made me take this into account. I think Black Widow's divisive depiction in the early parts of the MCU might have stuck with some women and turned them off from the character as a whole. I honestly kind of understand it though, even though Black Widow's sexuality is interesting and makes sense given how female spies in real life seduce their targets for information. I agree that sometimes things go too far. Case in point, letter C, Black Widow, Deadly Origin, and other mediocre Black Widow comics. Black Widow Deadly Origin by Paul Carnell, John Paul Leon, and Tom Rainey is one of the weirdest superhero stories I've read in my entire life, and a prime example of how bad Black Widow comics can be if the writer handles her sexuality poorly. The whole comic's premise is genuinely baffling. It's about Black Widow potentially giving all her past lovers a nanobite virus through sexual transmission. Aside from a few decent parts that retell her origin story, the whole miniseries is about a flipping Black Widow STD, which is insane. And you know what makes this arc even worse? Well, we find out that the man who raised Natasha, Ivan Petrovich Bezukov, implanted these nanobites in her because he was jealous of the dudes Natasha was with and also wanted to be her lover. In issue 3 of this series, we flash back to a time that he told her, "I didn't want to be your father, or your guardian, or your uncle, or your friend. I wanted more than that," which is absolutely insane and creepy and uncomfortable. This book shows how poorly made some Black Widow comics can be. Although there's no other Black Widow comic as weird as this, thankfully, there are others that I find to be mediocre chores to go through. With Natasha's hit or miss history, I think it makes sense why some people are reluctant to give her a try. D. A cold perfectionist without much internal struggle. Black Widow is an incredibly confident character with an insane level of skill and talent. She rarely screws up and doubts herself, and instead presses on toward the goal without a fuss. These are things that make her cool, but at the same time, not very relatable. Of course, not all characters have to be relatable. There are a ton of characters that we love that we can't connect with on a personal level. This isn't to say Natasha is not relatable, by the way. People can relate with her violent heritage and her past experience of psychological manipulation. It's just that even though Natasha has had struggles you can relate to, she's kind of moved past them. Black Widow also doesn't have many other characteristics that people can resonate with, aside from the fact that she's Russian and that she might have done ballet as a child, but her memories of learning ballet could have been implanted by the spy program. Superheroes like She-Hulk and Superman have day jobs readers can connect with. Meanwhile, Natasha is a spy, and not many have that as a career. Heroes also usually have quirks, interests, or personality traits that people can latch onto. Miss Marvel is a nerd who loves superheroes and video games. Daredevil's guilt comes from his complicated relationship with his Catholicism, which is extremely relatable to a lot of people. And Spider-Gwen at one point was in an indie rock band, which is super sick. Meanwhile, Black Widow is a pretty cold and distant character who doesn't express much emotion or enthusiasm, which is totally fine and honestly makes sense given her dark past. It's just that I find much more complexity and uniqueness in other characters compared to Black Widow. I know I might be offending some Black Widow fans with this point, and I don't mean to. We're just gonna have to agree to disagree. But one thing I think we can both agree on is my reasoning behind why Black Widow might not have as much depth as other characters. E. Lack of opportunity to be greater. Don't get me wrong, absolutely amazing creators have jumped on Black Widow and given it their own unique and creative spin, especially in the past few years. Mark Waid and Samnee notably elevated the character in their 12-issue series, which I already mentioned I love. Writer Nathan Edmondson and artist Phil Noto also made a Black Widow series that lasted for 20 issues in 2014 that so many fans love, and I appreciate some of the arcs in it, particularly the last one. But Black Widow series don't usually last very long to make that big of an impact, and so most creators go into the books giving their own unique spin on the character, but not adding significantly to her. Black Widow finds herself in this limbo of being popular enough to sell a few miniseries and garner great talent to work on her for short periods of time, but not being big enough for people to support a revolutionary 30-plus issue Black Widow series, which makes creative teams generally refrain from taking extremely ambitious swings at the character. But that didn't stop one series from flying close to the sun and doing something radical. What change did Black Widow have, though, in the comic we're about to discuss? Well, she ended up becoming someone nobody expected her to be. The change that occurred to her not only felt out of place, but one aspect of it was physiologically impossible for Natasha to be. For a sliver of time, Black Widow had a perfect suburban life. In 2020, Black Widow, for a short stint, was a wife, and most surprisingly, a mother. On September 2 of 2020, a new Black Widow title was spun by writer Kelly Thompson and artist Elena Casagrande, an ambitious series with an Eisner Award-winning first arc that would change everything and move the character forward. The first story arc in this series isn't just a welcoming comic for new readers, but feels like a culmination and celebration of the character that huge Black Widow fans can appreciate. It has everything that a good Black Widow story has, and also so much more. Prominent side characters like Yelena Belova, Bucky Barnes, Clint Barton, and even Natalia's ex-husband Alexei all play a role in this story. The action in it is incredible and showcases Natasha's skill, with every splash page drawn by Elena Casagrande being an exciting sight to behold. But what is most impressive about the comic is how it evolves and changes the character for the better. In the comic, villains tranquilize Black Widow and brainwash her into having this perfect life, where she's an architect with a loving husband named James, a cat named Logan, and a son named Stevie, who we later find out was genetically engineered. Some people have problems with this comic because the changes to Black Widow are through a method that has traumatized her in the past, brainwashing, and I totally understand that perspective. But I think the villains giving her amnesia to have a happy family life is an insanely bold and interesting move on the part of the writer, because Natalia, even though not seeming like a motherly figure, secretly wonders what it would be like if she was able to have a traditional path in life. In the 18th issue of Nathan Edmondson and Phil Noto's Black Widow, she asks her assistant out of the blue, "Do you think I would have been a good mother?" To which he replies, "No one is as driven as you are. I think you would have been the best at whatever path you might have chosen, or whatever path you might still choose. But that's not your path." And in the following panel, Black Widow acknowledges the fact that it isn't. Black Widow cannot be a mom. And that's not because of her dangerous life as a spy, it's because she is physiologically incapable of being a mom. In the second issue of Black Widow Deadly Origin, Natalia's ex-husband who faked his death said, "She was hard to live with. She wants to be a mother, a sweetheart, but they made her barren." The fifth issue of the Black Widow series in 2004 also confirms this, mentioning that the agents trained in Russia's super spy program would have an automatic miscarriage if ever they were pregnant. By giving Black Widow a perfect family life she loves, it gives her a tender side that she has never had before. We see her interact with her husband and child, and it is just so adorable and wholesome, but at the same time also gives her intense pain and grief when everything is taken away from her. Natasha's home is attacked, her memories return, and everything starts to make sense once again. She realizes that for the past few weeks, she's been living a lie, but it isn't a complete lie. The love that she has for her partner and child were real, and having to separate from them results in some of the most heartbreaking and emotionally vulnerable moments we've ever seen Natasha in. An explosion goes off while Natasha is saying her final goodbyes to her family. As she closes the door, symbolizing her return to being Black Widow once again, she is never the same. She holds Rubber Duck, the one that she and her son played with, and she's just emotionally wrecked. The click of the door closing is the darkest sound I have ever heard. It might as well be the sound of my heart turning to dust. It's the sound of dreams dying, a dream I never imagined I would have. Never knew how much I could love. Moment to moment is pure hell. My veins on fire, my bones made of nothing but sorrow. My mind dull as a river stone. My heart an empty husk, pumping away pointlessly. But when I can step out of myself for just a moment, I can imagine them somewhere, safe and happy, maybe even watching the same sunset. In those fleeting seconds, there's a feeling of, if not happiness, then at least peace. This is new territory for the character. We've never witnessed Black Widow be so vulnerable and broken before until this series. The loss of this wonderful family cuts her like a sharp knife, and this fresh food makes Natasha Romanoff a character you connect with and sympathize with. There's bitterness and grief and agony. For the first time in forever, Black Widow is a character that grows. Issue 6 and onward features standard Black Widow spy stuff. Natasha is the serious and capable character we all know and love, but this time there's more to it. Because of the love and care she has experienced over the past few weeks, she doesn't opt to go for revenge, instead surrounding herself with a new family in the form of Yelena Belova, Bucky Barnes, and Clint Barton. She calls on the help of characters like Kate Bishop and Anya Corazon to help out, and even recruits 2 teenagers working for the bad guy to turn over a new leaf and fight on the side of good. This is pretty expected in Kelly Thompson's work. A lot of her books have a quirky and diverse cast of side characters that surround the main protagonist. But for a Black Widow comic to have Natasha allow others to help her, that's pretty rare. With the exception of the comic Web of Black Widow, where she allows some Avengers to help her beat the bad guy, this is the only comic I know where she truly embraces teamwork and companionship, and it's honestly really sweet. Instead of distancing herself from those around her after tragedy strikes, Natasha instead chooses to work with others. And what's cool about her working with others is that it makes the missions so much more fun. In the final arc of the series, we have a part of the team that's been captured trying to escape. We have Black Widow having a one-on-one duel with the Living Blade, and we also have Bucky Barnes making sure one of the other villains fails to escape on their helicopter. Having more characters be part of the action means that Kelly Thompson can come up with more interesting scenarios and creative action sequences. And they are super cool. The action in this Black Widow series is stellar, not just because of the gorgeous art by whoever illustrates it, but also because of the many characters that make beating the bad guys so much more complicated and interesting. There's so many things I haven't even mentioned that are great about the book. This is one of the first times ever where I read a comic where the substitute artists, in this case Rafael Pimentel and Rafael de la Torre, were just as good as the main artist. The covers of the series were also all made by Adam Hughes, which makes this a very cool series to collect in issue format because of the consistency in art style. I haven't even mentioned how well the cast of characters blend together and create really good, quirky, and memorable moments. There's just so much to love about this book in almost every aspect, which is why it is so unfortunate that, well, the series got cancelled. Black Widow by Kelly Thompson and Elena Casagrande is one of modern Marvel's best, a showcase of how superhero comics can experiment and bring new life to a character that's decades old. It was a book that swung for the fences and hit it out of the ballpark. Not only did it retain the best parts of Black Widow's character, but it also pushed her forward. We saw Natasha, a cold and distant character, become more vulnerable and compassionate. But unfortunately, the series would end at issue 15, which was published on April 6 of 2022. Reading the last published arc, it's immediately obvious that it wasn't meant to end. Natasha finally couldn't resist the urge and requested someone to track down her lost husband and child, whom Bucky Barnes hid. There was still undealt emotion and unsettled grief. The series ends on a touching and melancholy scene with all the characters happily feasting on food while Natasha reflects on all that has happened. It's a sweet ending, but it's clear that there was more planned. Things just didn't go the way the creators wanted to. So, what now? The reception and cancellation of Kelly Thompson's Black Widow series reminds us of a harsh truth that's difficult to accept, that not all good art garners success. In an ideal world, great art would always flourish and gain a strong enough audience to keep continuing. And even though there are success stories like the recent Poison Ivy and Swamp Thing series, which were extended because fans and critics love them, not every good book gets sufficient support. Around a month ago, to everyone's surprise, Al Ewing's Avengers Inc. was cancelled after just 5 issues. This was a high-profile writer who worked on one of the most successful comics of the last decade in The Immortal Hulk, creating a detective-themed book where Janet Van Dyne and Victor Shade solve an interesting ongoing mystery. But it didn't get enough single-issue sales to survive. Almost every writer has had one of their titles cut short, but cancellations will always be a part of the comics and entertainment industry. It's impossible for every single work of art to pay off financially. As consumers, I don't really know how much of a difference we can make. I doubt that we can make every underrated comic survive for an additional 25 issues just by spreading the word, but I do think it's important for us to know that there are many great and underappreciated comics out there and that our support for them matters. I hope that this year we collectively give more attention to the comics we love rather than bickering at each other online and sending comic creators death threats for creating what is at the end of the day harmless fiction. During a time when a lot of people question the quality of modern comics, sharing how wonderful and impressive some current comics are could go a long way in helping the industry. And maybe, just maybe, if we learn to be a more appreciative, mature, and positive fan base, we can make the next Black Widow by Kelly Thompson last a little while longer. Thank you very much for watching this whole thing. I spent a really long time making this, and I'm sure I'm gonna spend way more hours editing this, so I really appreciate your support. Also, if you're wondering, I'm sick, that's why my voice sounds extremely nasally and tired. I can only record videos in the middle of the night, and this one's so long, so it's like 4 right now. I have to go to bed soon, but I just want to say thank you very much for all your support last year. Thanks for the comments. Thanks Jake and Cicada Human for donating to Ko-Fi. I didn't expect that. But yeah, I'm very glad with how the channel has been doing. We had 1 video pop off last year, and it's nice to know that I'm not releasing videos into the void anymore. But yeah, anyway, stay tuned. This year there's gonna be more stuff as usual. And my next 2 videos are about my relationship with 2 different indie comics that came out recently. So stay tuned for those. But yeah, my name is Joshua C. And I will see you in the next one.